On December the 8th, 2019, Dr. Al Sears and the world's leading authorities on stem cells and regenerative healing and anti-aging therapies held a summit at the O Resort in Palm Beach, Florida. Among the speakers were luminaries such as Speaker of the House Newt Gingrich, Dr. John Gray, Elizabeth Parrish, and the co-founder of Life Extension, Bill Faloon, and his outstanding presentation.
Our next guest, Bill Faloon, founded Life Extension in 1977. Today it has grown into one of the world's largest consumer-based anti-aging medical groups. In 2017, William Faloon founded the Age Reversal Network, a private association dedicated to identifying and validating effective age reversal interventions. He has done all of this while battling the FDA and winning. Today, Bill will be sharing the results from his recent human age reversal studies and a new clinical trial that seeks to induce meaningful rejuvenation of aged people within a 12-month period. Please help me welcome to the stage Mr. Bill Faloon.
Thank you, thank you. I'm going to talk to you about a concept that a couple years ago no one seriously ever considered. That is the concept of reversing biological aging in elderly people. And in order to enable you to pay attention to what I'm saying, every single slide I'm going to present them really fast. They're available on this website, age-reversal.net. So you can pay attention to the words and then look up the slides you're interested in when you get home. But the new paradigm, a true biomedical renaissance, is the prospect of rejuvenating elderly people in a statistically significant and meaningful manner. That is our objective. And we couldn't even consider this, couldn't even think about doing it until around the year 2015. This is the year that the prospect of reversing aging in old people turned real. Now, Time magazine that year published a very famous edition. This has been shown in many conferences where babies born in 2015 were going to live to be well over 100 years of age. What Time magazine didn't know at that time is research was already going on to enable people alive back then, and certainly alive right now, to potentially live for many, many hundreds of years. This is the cover of New Scientist, published earlier in 2019, talking about a cure for biological aging. And that's based on research that you have just heard talked about regarding telomerase, telomere lengthening, and many other treatment modalities that are going to make aging a relic of the past. So the most current special edition of Time no longer talks about babies. They're talking about aging itself no longer being a dreadful inevitability. It's just a matter of putting the pieces of the puzzle together that's going to enable us to take old people and rejuvenate them in a significant manner. And we're getting tremendous media coverage. The front cover, MIT Technology Review, proclaims old age is over. Now, the article inside was not quite as optimistic, but they gave a lot of the work that I'm doing and others some nice publicity and put it in front of some very high-level people so these people can understand if you're going to invest, donate, or participate, age reversal is where it's at. So if you wonder what's been going on over the last 4 years, maybe you've missed out on something, don't feel bad about that. Age reversal didn't turn real as it related to people anyway until around 2015. And that's when some very wealthy people in Silicon Valley decided, well, we've already accomplished the impossible. Let's just try to take on the challenge of aging and treat that as a technical issue that can be resolved. Founders of Google set up a separate subsidiary designed to find a way to gain total control over aging. They put a lot of money into that. This cover of Forbes magazine, this individual, Osmo Kaibar, a multi-billionaire, he's got a company putting huge amounts of money into anti-aging research. Mark Zuckerberg has pledged 99% of everything he has, and he has a lot, to finding a cure for every age-related disease that exists. Jeff Bezos of Amazon, he is looking at senolytics as a way to treat aging, as a way to reverse aging based on a lot of information I'm going to convey to you today. And possibly the largest fundraiser so far, an individual named Jim Mellon. He set up a company called Juvenescence, and he's raised well over $165 million to fund research aimed at enabling people to live to be at least 150 years of age. So you've got all of this amalgamation coming together, and a lot of it is based on the work of Dr. George Church at Harvard. He received some interesting publicity back in 2015. He is an expert on CRISPR-Cas9 gene editing technology. Once that technology is perfected, a cure for aging is likely to soon follow. So the Washington Post talked about this in 2015, a Harvard professor, and he has continued to get very favorable coverage, and that has resulted in him getting lots and lots of money to do his research. George Church, as far as I know, is an immortalist like I am. He wants to live for an indefinite period of time, so his research is more than just trying to prove a science or make some money. He personally wants to benefit, and he's also stated he may be one of the first human study subjects to have his genes edited so he becomes a biologically younger human being. So year 2015 is the year that a critical mass of donors, investors, physician scientists decided it's time to live forever. This is unprecedented. It's never occurred before in the entire history of me working at the Life Extension Group since 1977. We founded that back 42 years ago. I never thought I'd be talking to a group of people in my lifetime about putting aging in reverse. But what happened in 2015 is Nature, and this is a scientific journal that is paid attention to by the media. If you see something on Fox News, CNN, the Wall Street Journal, a major medical advance, it's often published and editorialized in Nature. And what they talked about in 2015 is the consistency of the data that when young blood is circulated into old animals, the old animals grow younger. And Nature said, well, it's time for us to start testing this in people, and that's exactly what started happening. Around 2015, 2016, the most significant, most prestigious research universities in the world are studying the effects of young plasma in older people and how that may enable rejuvenating effects to occur. Johnson & Johnson put $50 million into a study at Stanford University where they're looking for the constituents in young plasma that can reverse degenerative brain aging. A huge, huge undertaking, and they're getting some very interesting results. They tried some results with just teenage blood, teenage human blood injected into old animals. Well, it rejuvenated the old animals. This is proof that the concept of something in young blood has powerful rejuvenating effects when administered to older organisms. In this case, we're looking at young teenage blood put into old mice and their aging process going in reverse. Absolutely spectacular. As Bill Andrews said, we just don't want to see biomarkers. We want to be active. If we're going to reverse aging, we want to start behaving younger, and that's exactly what happened. Fresh, young, teenage blood enabled the animals to scamper around a cage and start to behave like they were young mice again. The blood from teenagers put into these old mice enabled neurogenesis, new brain cells to grow, so that horrific atrophy that occurs with aging in our hippocampal region of the brain, it can be reversed with young plasma constituents. If you wonder what happens when young blood circulates into old animals, well, they live 10 to 12 human equivalent years longer. So longer lifespan and systemic regeneration. We already know how to do it in a laboratory model. It's just a matter of transferring it into humans. Study came out this year, which was absolutely dynamic. They looked at a more efficient way to take those young blood constituents to rejuvenate old mice. And what they did is they transplanted bone marrow from young mice into old mice. And the impact was absolutely incredible. This chart shows microglial cells. These are a brain cell that helps maintain our neurons. And you can see at the far left, a young mouse, the cells have branches extending from them like a healthy young tree. Well, this represents the synaptic connectome that enables these cells to communicate with each other. And you look at the old mouse, and it's all shriveled. It's shriveled like an old person with sarcopenia and osteoporosis and cartilage degeneration. It's just what happens with aging. We know that. Outwardly, we know that happens. It also happens inside our brain. But when they took young bone marrow and transplanted it into the older mice, look at that slide to the far right in red. The synaptic connections were restored. back to the same number, the same type of structure as a young mouse. So don't let anyone ever tell you aging cannot be reversed. It's already being done in the laboratory model, and yet most of the public still thinks it only goes in one direction. And again, if you're wondering, well, what happens when you regenerate the microglial cells of those mice? Well, there's systemic regeneration. They start to scamper around a cage. This slide shows the activity levels of old mice with young bone marrow transplants. And the lower slide to the far right is the old mice with young bone marrow. They're scampering around the cage like the young mice, and that's the box on the upper right-hand corner. So we're seeing that young blood, young plasma constituents can regenerate aged brains and systemically regenerate our body. Now, what's been happening based on all I've been talking about so far is some people have been self-experimenting with human plasma up to 35 years of age, and my advice at this stage is hold back on that. We haven't seen consistent results with middle-aged human plasma being put into old people. In other words, we need something somewhat better. So even though some people are still paying every couple months for plasma that's not particularly young, we're not seeing the rejuvenating effects that we hope we would. But what we're also looking at are the animal studies showing that very young plasma can have a much more meaningful impact. Now, the Stanford University scientists, remember they got that big grant from Johnson & Johnson, they did take middle-aged plasma and they put it into old mice, and there were some reversals of brain aging noted. But when they took very young plasma, 15-day-old mice compared to 15-month-old mice, there was systemic rejuvenation. Broad-spectrum, pronounced regeneration of neurological function and structure. And if you want to know the difference between a 15-day-old mouse and a 15-month-old mouse, well, here's the graphic. That mouse to the far right, that tiny little 15-day-old mouse, has all types of regenerative proteins in its serum. Where the older mouse, that one is middle-aged, well, it looks like an old person, frankly, who's got metabolic syndrome and obese, type 2 diabetes. You don't want middle-aged blood put in your body. You want very, very young plasma protein constituents. And the fantastic news is they identified two specific proteins in young serum, very young serum, thrombosbondin 4 and spark-like protein 1. Those two proteins, they believe, were responsible for these powerful rejuvenating properties. And what is so exciting about that is they know how to make these in the laboratory through recombinant technology. That means we don't have to go and raid nurseries looking for 2-year-old kids and suck out their blood. We don't have to do that because they've already identified the proteins most likely responsible, and they can already synthesize them. So 2 to 3 years from now, we may be having some of these very young proteins put into our aged bodies and enjoy these incredible rejuvenating properties. Now, as it relates to what we can do right now to extend our healthy lifespan, a study came out just a couple months ago where 3 different drugs were used to extend the lifespan in fruit flies by 48%. And you wonder, well, these are fruit flies, is 48% really a big deal? Well, yeah, it is, because typically when they do a fruit fly study, they see a 5 to 20% lifespan extension if the therapy works, and they're all excited about that. Well, this particular protocol enabled 48% extensions of lifespan. And the 3 compounds, rapamycin, which is available, by the way, in the United States at a price you can't afford, but it's available from offshore sources at very low prices. Lithium, low-cost dietary supplement, you can buy that anywhere, and a dasatinib-like drug, which is also available. 3 different compounds administered together, extended lifespan 48%. Well, what happened when they administered just one compound? They got an 11% extension. That's good, but not really that good, because 11% means there's going to be a time when we run out real soon. 2 drugs, hey, 30%. That's pretty good, but when they put all 3 of these together, they got that 48% increase in healthy life extension. Very, very significant, because it validates what our age reversal network and what our life extension group is doing right now to help rejuvenate older people. We're using almost 12 different therapies in a stair-step approach to reverse every pathological mechanism of aging we can identify. 12 different interventions, and we're doing that in a stair-step approach. We suggest, first of all, activate AMPK. Now, you can do that through severe calorie restriction, but I think metformin is a little bit easier to take. And if you can't take metformin, there are certain nutrients that have AMPK activating properties. Your body accumulates senescent cells as we grow old. Senolytics are documented right now to reverse many, many aspects of aging, including in people. You, of course, want to restore your levels of nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide, NAD+, and remove the toxic debris that's inside your cells through autophagy, and that's how rapamycin works. And then the biologics, that's step number 5 on that chart. And biologics can mean stem cells, stem cell exosomes, some of the gene therapies that Bill Andrews just talked about. Step 5 is the biologics. And we think if you do all that, there's a good chance you're going to live to 2030 when Dr. George Church at Harvard believes a cure for aging will be available to all of us.
With us now is Dr. Al Sears. Al, it's such a pleasure to be with you here today.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
You know, I've been reading about you and looking at your material. It's pretty amazing. And just to catch you off guard, I read a book called Confessions of a Medical Heretic by Dr. Mendelsohn. He was, I think, the president of the AMA at some point, and to everyone's horror, he turned his back and criticized Big Pharma and so forth. And here you are with a whole career of pioneering. Tell us about it a little.
Well, that's very generous of you to compare me to him and to use the word pioneer. I do consider myself a different point of view. I have a predisposition that came not so much from medicine, but from being a farmer and being a nutritionist, that then I brought that with me to medicine. So I had a little bit of a different perspective from the beginning. But really, I think what made me kind of break ranks was not really so much over the treatment, but I do have differences in my treatments than most doctors in orthodoxy. But it was more over the ethics of the whole thing. It is my contention that a doctor and a patient are partners, not a commander and a subordinate. I don't bark orders to my patients, and that became difficult for me in residency. You weren't supposed to ask the patient if they wanted to have surgery. As a matter of fact, that was a big problem. I was in charge of pre-oping patients, and I would always ask them, has somebody explained to you what's going to happen, and do you want this? What? I have a choice? Well, no, I don't want the surgery. So you can imagine how that played out in the orthopedic wards. But it was over that ethical issue of autonomy. John Stuart Mill said over his own body, a man's autonomy is absolute. And medicine wants to take that from you. If you don't believe me, God forbid, you should have the bad luck of winding up in a hospital. You are treated like a child, like a prisoner, and you are given orders, and if you resist, they put a curse on you. Well, I can't be responsible for the heart attack you're going to have if you don't take this drug. And the whole system is built on that wrong-minded ethic. The highest principle of medicine is not beneficence, it's autonomy. You have to respect the autonomy of the individual, and you work with them. It's more like a cooperative dance than an engineering project.
Interesting. Maybe that's why I always leave hospitals AMA.
Yeah, I know. I've done the same thing with my son. When my son was born, it was a fight from the very beginning. Whose child do you think this is? It doesn't belong to you because he was born in a hospital. That's my son. And I eventually signed him out, AMA.
Sir, how is your clinic different from so many other clinics in this country?
By the way, to finish up on that point, it shows how much the thinking has become distorted to believe that you have to sign out AMA against medical advice. You don't. Who can make you? Says who? You want to leave a hospital, you get up and you leave. You're not in prison. But everybody is convinced of that. Even the hospital workers are convinced that they somehow have authority over you in that regard. Who gave that to them? There's no law. You want to leave a hospital, you get up and you leave. They can't stop you. But they believe they can, and sometimes they might even try, but they have no legal right.
And of course, a sad fact. I'd like to ask you about stem cell therapy, which has been controversial for years, and now they're about to implement some new rules, I believe, very shortly. What's your position on that?
Yes, it has had an interesting history. I thought for a time, as many of my colleagues did, that this might be a chance for us to get out from under the heel of repressive orthodoxy through the AMA. You can only do what they approve. And they use a very heavy hand to enforce that, including the threat of taking away a doctor's license or even imprisonment. They have taken raids on doctors who gave vitamins with guns drawn and like a SWAT team, using the power of the government to stop people from using alternative methods of healing with no evidence of harm, just that they were violating orthodoxy.
Big interests.
Yes, and we thought with stem cells, because they are so advanced in comparison to drugs, because they are nature's repair kit. They are the body's own first responders. They go to where there's damage from aging or chronic disease or injury, and they set up a traffic directing system, and they bring nutrients and additional cells that are tailor-made and ingenious in how they can rebuild new tissue. They replace parts. But there's a bigger problem, and that is that since those are embryonic cells, they can develop into any kind of cell line, including immune-competent cells. And that has a big potential side effect because those cells can attack you, what we call graft versus host disease, which is very dangerous and a very bad side effect to have. So we would never use those. We use your own. So if you think about it, this is the perfect opportunity for the AMA and the FDA to back off a bit because we're only doing it for people's own cells. And clearly, everybody can agree that you own the cells in your own body, right? They're your property. If you don't own that, what can you own in this world? So we thought maybe, after a couple of years of perfecting these things and getting them to work and finding that they were cures for diseases that we previously thought were incurable, like heart disease, like diabetes, like Alzheimer's, great potential there, and again, decades ahead of drug therapy. But when Trump was elected, everyone thought that maybe this is an anti-central control kind of new administration. And we had a lot of hope with Scott Gottlieb, who was the first appointee by Trump to be in charge of healthcare. And we thought, now maybe there will be a more liberal approach and, let 1,000 flowers bloom and get some creative competition in medicine, which is very sorely lacking in conventional medicine. But much to my chagrin, one of the first things that Dr. Gottlieb decided to do was conduct a war on stem cells. He actually went on TV and saying how proud he was to shut down these charlatans that were putting people in danger by people using people's own stem cells, what he calls an unapproved drug. So now the cells that are in your body are regarded as unapproved drugs by the FDA.
How interesting is that? Now, you actually were inspired by another pioneer, my dear friend Bill Faloon, who founded Life Extension Foundation back in the day, and life extension is so much in the forefront of research these days. Tell us how Bill and Life Extension influenced you.
Yes, and that's how you and I become connected, was through Bill. And it had a big influence on me. I was about 15 years old, at home in southern Ohio watching TV, and I saw on, I think, the Merv Griffin show, a pioneer of integrative nutritional therapy, Dirk Pearson, who was one of the early founders of the whole movement with Life Extension Foundation. And he was talking about phosphatidylcholine and inositol and phosphatidyl compounds that could be used as supplements that would influence brain power. He was saying you could affect IQ and affect age-related memory decline. And it really influenced me. I thought, wow, now there's somebody else. There's at least one other person in the world that believes in the power of nutrition to heal. So I kind of searched for anything that he was related to. And we didn't have the internet then, but you could go to a library, you could do searches on Silver Platter and look for research and search periodicals. And I found he was involved in a few lawsuits, and I found the connection there to Life Extension Foundation, and I tracked them for years. As a matter of fact, when I got out of medical school and I formed my first business was just associated with the practice. It was a kind of an integrated practice. But the second company I formed was a foundation. And I did it very much after the model of Life Extension Foundation.
Dr. Sears, it's been a real privilege and pleasure. We have to do this again soon one of these days.
My pleasure. Thank you.
I'll be right back.
Human age reversal. We may be there already. Human studies are now ready to begin to confirm meaningful reversal of pathological aging processes. These clinical trials aim to alter older humans so that they function as much younger individuals. Even modest success will result in a paradigm shift that will impart enormous societal benefits, such as sparing Medicare from insolvency. Life extension is not standing idle while 5,000 Americans die each day from age-related illnesses. Joining us are physician scientists who want to hurry up these technologies to keep people from aging to death. While Life Extension is pushing these projects forward, we need financial help to ensure these studies are carried through to fruition.
This concludes our special show on advances in anti-aging therapy. I'm Richard Peritz. Thank you for being with us.